Hi there. Thank you for tuning in today. We will be exploring the topic, the fires of hell. Let's get to it. In the last couple of weeks, if you remember, last week in particular, one of the major takeaway lessons that we learned was that in every endeavor of life, there are fundamental principles of approach that, if followed, would ultimately demystify all ambiguities, bring clarity, and better understanding of otherwise complex concepts. The Bible is not different. And last week, we were able to test this hypothesis on some complex Bible passages, and we got clarity. Now, here is a quick summary of some of the fundamental Bible principles that we adopted in our exercise last week. 1. Since God is consistent, it means that his opinion on every topic would also be consistent all through the Bible. Therefore, if an interpretation of a Bible text is not consistent with God's opinion on the topic and the rest of the Bible, it's most likely not the correct interpretation of that text. Number 2, if when you read a text, you do not get clarity on what the text is saying, that's fine. It happens to the best of us. Refer to somewhere else where the same topic is addressed for clarity. This principle is contingent on the fact that God is consistent. Okay, so now that we have all our tools, let's get to work. The question we will be attempting to answer this week, adopting these principles, is what really happens after death? You see, the answer to this question is linked to yet another question. Is the soul truly immortal? Well, there can only be two options here. It's either a yes, it is immortal, or a no, it's not. Now, those who argue that the soul is immortal, they also propose three other experiences of the soul at death. They propose that at death, while the wicked go to hell and the righteous to heaven, there is yet another interesting group that are neither fully righteous nor fully wicked. And the proponents of this school of thought suggest that this particular group, they go to a place of purification called purgatory, where they suffer for their sins to attain purity prior gaining their entrance into heaven. And the actions of the living relatives could reduce the extent of their suffering in purgatory. Now, to validate this interpretation, we will be screening each part of the interpretation with the tools from our hypothesis. The consistency of interpretation. Let's start with the first, the wicked going to hell. Now, since all life comes from God, and it is still the same God who kindles the fire of hell, this interpretation would imply that for every person that goes to hell, God himself will meticulously increase the heat of hell just enough to torture them continually while still sustaining their lives. Classic. So, if this cycle happened for, say, a couple of hours, a day, maybe a week, or even a month, we might argue that some people actually deserve that. But for eternity, meaning millions and billions of years and still more, that will mean the God is cruel. And I dare to say that is anti the character of God. It will defy any trace of joy in heaven, knowing your relative is roasting in hell for eternity while you're having fun. That is not consistent with the character of God and what the Bible says. 2. The interpretation that the souls go to purgatory and from purgatory to heaven would imply that at death, the soul is both alive and conscious, which is not consistent with the Bible's opinion on the topic that the dead know nothing. 3. If at death the soul goes straight to heaven, why then is there a resurrection and a judgment? Again, this is contradictory to the Bible's opinion on the topic. In summary, this interpretation of immortality of the soul is inconsistent with the rest of the Bible, and having failed the consistency test, we can confirm it is not the correct interpretation. The only other alternative answer to the question is that the soul is not immortal. It is an assembly of the body and the breath of God that dissociates into its component parts at death and ceases to exist as a conscious unit. Remain your Sabbath Dodo, and I'll see you next Sabbath. Happy Sabbath.